Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. What we have right here is the brand new Google Pixel 5a, the newest phone in a very exciting series from Google, which for the past couple years has been arguably giving us the best mid-range phone you could buy, or at the very least, a very easy recommendation. They've been giving you a great camera experience, great battery life, and that proprietary Google software that gives you a smooth, fast experience on even a relatively affordable phone. So this phone right here, needless to say, has some big shoes to fill. And we're gonna test this out throughout this video, but the first thing you might notice is how similar it looks to last year's Google Pixel 4a 5G. Now, last year there were two A series that came out, the 4a and the 4a 5G. The difference was really the size, the processor, and a couple other things like that. But the 4a 5G, you'll notice, looks a lot like this phone right here, the Pixel 5a. And that might lead you to wonder, first of all, what the differences are, and I'll explain what they are, because there are quite a few. And also, secondly, why would Google make a phone that looks so similar to last year's design? And I think it comes down to this. The purpose of the Pixel A series is to give you a great experience at a very low price. And so giving you a great experience is something they've already been doing. They have great software for their cameras, they have great software to make the entire phone run fast and efficiently, and they give you a really long battery life. So to make things cheaper, there's really two ways you could do that. You could design a cheap phone, or you could take a phone that you already designed and make it cheaper. Now, the benefit of the latter is that you're going to get what's called economies of scale, which means when you have a lot of parts being ordered, they're naturally going to be cheaper, which I think is why they went with a very familiar design here, because they're going to be able to use a lot of their old molds, a lot of their old designs without having to do a lot of work to redesign it, and also to maintain that high quantity, at least the high quantity of orders to give you that lower price. So from things like the camera bump, the buttons on the side, the fingerprint sensor, a lot of things like that are going to be saving them money because they're using some familiar parts from a previous model. Now, with that being said, let's take a look at this phone physically to see what the differences actually are between this and last year's 4a 5G. Now, looking at the back, the first thing you'll notice, and I tried to catch some different lights here, it's actually a slightly different color. This is actually called mostly black, although when you look at it, it definitely is a very, very dark forest green kind of. So in some lighting, you can definitely see it looks very green. In other lighting, it definitely looks really black. Now, you'll see that the back is also slightly different, although you can't tell on the video right here, it's actually a metal unibody rather than the polycarbonate one we saw last year, which should give you, overall more durable phone, but also a better water resistance rating. IP67 means that you don't have to worry about this phone if you're getting it wet. That's a huge positive that we normally don't see in a lot of mid-range phones. So the metal unibody is actually coated, so it's really hard to tell that it's not plastic. It feels a lot like plastic, although it doesn't really have a lot of flex, and it does feel very sturdy. So overall physical build, good job. That's definitely a major improvement, although it's subtle and you don't notice it at first glance. We still have that fingerprint sensor on the back, which I think is great. It's a very fast way to sign in. We also have the camera bump. You'll notice that they did remove the laser autofocus on the bottom. Maybe that's to save cost, maybe it's because they didn't actually need it, software was improved, whatever the reason might be. We still do have two cameras back here and a flash, and the two cameras are going to be identical. Here's the big positive. They're identical to what we saw on the Pixel 5 last year. So we're looking at a 12.2 megapixel wide angle and a 16 megapixel ultra wide. I'll test out the cameras in a second, but we already know they're gonna do a fantastic job. Looking at the front, we have a slightly larger display right here. And instead of last year's 6.2-inch display, this is now 6.3 inches. It is a 1080p OLED display with 60 hertz. A small disappointment. I know a lot of people wanted to see at least 90 hertz on here, but all things considered, 60 is still going to do a reasonable job, and you are saving money on this device, which I didn't mention the price yet. I'll have a link in the top of the description because these things are known to go on some pretty good sales, but off the bat, it is selling for $449, which is $50 cheaper than last year's Pixel 4a 5G, despite being an improved design, and it's substantially cheaper than last year's Pixel 5, despite, again, having the same cameras. Looking around the outside, you'll see on the right we have our volume rocker below our power button, and the power button now has a nice little accent color, and it is textured, so I think that's really nice to just in your pocket feel where the button is right out the bat when you take it out of your pocket, and it also kind of just looks cool. I like having that textured button. On the top, you'll see on the front, we have our little earpiece speaker. This does have stereo, so we have speakers on the bottom and the top. But we also have our headphone jack, another exciting thing that you don't see on just about any other phone out there. Even a lot of the budget phones are starting to remove that headphone jack. So having that here in a brand new phone 2021, I mean, I think that's a positive. On the left side, we have our SIM tray, and on the bottom, we do have our speaker and our USB Type-C port. This unfortunately does not have wireless charging yet, but it does still have that 18-watt fast charging, and it does come with a nice charger in the box. Now, I mentioned the display was slightly larger, but another difference is that we do actually have Gorilla Glass 6 on here versus last year's Gorilla Glass 3, so a slight improvement there as well for overall durability. But as far as the design goes, I'm really happy that Pixel actually stayed with this same design. I know some people wanted something a little more exciting, but like I said, driving the cost down and giving you better specs, I think is going to be overall a better performing phone and more appealing. It's already been easy to recommend, and this honestly is easier than ever. Now, looking at what's under the hood with this, we do have that Snapdragon 765G, which is the same processor we saw last year in the Pixel 5, so that's a big positive there. And we have a larger battery than the Pixel 4a 5G rather. This one is looking at about 4,680 milliamp hours, which is relatively standard for a phone of this size, but with the software and with this chip, you're gonna get a fantastic battery life out of this. Google does a great job with managing battery, and I mean, even last year's Pixel 4a and 4a 5G, in my opinion, they had a pretty fantastic battery life, and I think this one is really going to be doing the same. So remember, a common theme, like I said, for this phone is going to be Google really trying to capitalize on economies of scale, really trying to order as many of the same part as possible. And so you can really get any configuration you want of this phone as long as it's this color, 128 gigabytes of storage, and 6 gigabytes of RAM. Really, that's it. You only get one configuration, which I don't think is necessarily a drawback. I think that's kind of the base level. Anything higher storage than that, you're looking at higher prices anyway. So with that being said, let's jump into a camera and speaker test. Of course, we're using the same camera sensor on here that we had for several years back on the Pixel, but of course with software, the Google camera app on here does a fantastic job, and you're gonna get some great still shots. But keep in mind, if you're doing the same shots on Snapchat or Instagram, sometimes they might not look quite as good. Okay, so this is a sample of the video. You can see it's not nearly as refined as the photos, which is very common for a Pixel phone, but we can actually zoom in and out. So if we start here and we pinch, we can zoom out to the ultra wide, and it wasn't the smoothest. Actually, that looks pretty smooth right there. You can see a small color transition when they switch lenses, but otherwise relatively seamless, consistent color, consistent all the way across the board really. And so you guys can leave a comment. Let me know what you think of the video quality right here. Of course, this is in 4K, can go up to 4K 60. Oh, you saw the white balance just adjusted right there actually. But let's check out the selfie lens now. All right, so this is the front-facing camera. The sun's on my face, so you can see the dynamic range struggles a little bit with this. If I turn into the shadows, it definitely does a better job here. Overall, this is shooting 1080p, so not nearly the same quality. It's a little unfortunate to see that, but otherwise, I mean, it does a decent job. It's a little bit less stable than the rear lens, but leave a comment and let me know what you think the audio and video quality is like on both the front and rear-facing cameras. So taking a look at the photos, you have a really nice natural blur, good sharpness, overall very true color. And so I think a really common theme with the photos from any Pixel is the white balance and the colors are really very accurate. Here again, you can see the nice natural blur of the background. Overall, really nice looking photos. The portrait mode does a pretty decent job as well. I think a little bit over sharpened on the face, but otherwise very accurate lines on where to blur and where not to blur. Also pretty good colors here as well. Looking at the ultra wide, they do a good job of not distorting too much on the edges and really capturing a really wide frame. I believe it's 0.6x zoom is what they call this. And then we can go into the standard, which looks great. 2x digital zoom, honestly looks very usable. And then 7x is where it really kind of breaks down and is not quite as usable. The selfie lens does a pretty decent job with colors as well. This one looks a little bit warm, but I was in the shade. The selfie portrait mode also does a really exceptional job. Great dynamic range, overall looks great, but if you look to the side, so as a profile, you'll see there are some bubbles of clarity. So overall, the Pixel 5a, despite recycling last year's physical design, does have some subtle improvements, which makes it, again, a very viable option as possibly the best mid-range phone you can buy. That doesn't mean it is, but it definitely is, at the very least, an easy recommendation for anybody who wants 5G, wants a fantastic battery life, wants a great camera experience, and of course wants those Pixel software features. Like I said, because this is running Google's version of Android, you're getting a very fast, smooth experience. You're getting that long battery life, great efficiency, and they're throwing in some features as well, from like Hold for Me on the phone app, or maybe even call screening on there as well, among many others that Google has always been integrating into their Pixels. But you guys can leave a comment below. Is this something that you'll be buying, or is the design just a little too boring for you? Of course, I want to hear from you guys. As always, let me know your thoughts are on the Google Pixel 5a. If you found this video helpful, consider liking and subscribing. As always, I'm Mike O'Brien. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.